So when I was 24 years old, I came across the practice of hypnotherapy, and I started learning hypnotherapy, the power of the subconscious mind, how all of our identity, all of our and all of our values that we've been creating throughout our life is all stored into the depth of our subconscious mind. And it was right then when it clicked to me. None of those counselors or therapists or psychologists that I had seen over those years had ever even explained to me what the subconscious mind was. I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea what the subconscious mind was when I was talking to the hypnotist about that. I said, what is it? And that's when he started explaining to me that that's essentially the iceberg. The majority of that iceberg is the subconscious mind under the surface that we don't see. He said, the reason you are the way you are is because all these issues are stored so embedded into your subconscious mind that it's become your identity. Well, he taught me that hypnotherapy is a tool to help us undo that. And most of us simply don't have the tools to access those layers of the subconscious mind.
In this engaging conversation, Braun shares his transformative journey from a troubled childhood marked by addiction and anxiety to discovering the power of hypnotherapy and spirituality. He discusses the influence of Norse mythology on his life, particularly the teachings of Odin, and how these insights have shaped his philosophy of mind, body, and spirit integration through his initiative, Dranger Discipline. The discussion emphasizes the importance of holistic healing and personal growth, encouraging listeners to explore their own paths to self-discovery. Braun discusses his approach to fitness and personal development through Primal Instinct Training, emphasizing the importance of reconnecting with our innate nature. He explores the holistic integration of mind, body, and spirit, and the transformative power of hypnosis for healing and spiritual growth. And the dialogue also touches on finding purpose, daily practices for mental clarity, and the significance of maintaining hope and resilience.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Otsunaga Sagas podcast. We are here with a very good friend of mine, Braun from Dranger Discipline, and we're here to have a fun discussion, talk about his theories on his business, that whole mind, body, spirit thing, and maybe a bit about himself and where he's come from, and just see where this conversation goes, where it's fun, right?
I'm excited. Let's do it.
All right. Aaron, you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you come from, where you come from, what you do?
So I'm fresh off my 38th birthday here, just literally a week ago here. So let's go back in time a little bit here. I've been following my spiritual path and my physical path for about 10 years now, since I was in my late 20s. And so I was born to parents that were 13 and 15 years old. So they were just kids themselves. My mom and dad were 13 and 15 respectively. They had no idea what they were doing. So I grew up with my alcoholic grandparents. My grandma, she had a sweet soul. She was very caring, but she was burdened by her own issues in life that weighed her down. My step grandpa himself was a heavy alcoholic, a very violent man, an angry man. So I spent the first several years of my life in a household that saw nothing but addiction, abuse, alcohol abuse, violence. Some of my youngest memories in life where I was 7 or 8 years old, I remember being left home alone while they would go out to the bar. They would drink, come home drunk. He would come home angry. And it was just a habitual nightmare that kept me in this cycle of panic and anxiety. And by the time that I was 12 or 13, I started to develop severe panic attacks at 2 in the morning. I would wake up at 2 in the morning, typically the time they would come home, with a panic attack. I started being able to, eat fast food 2, 3 times a day. I never did drugs. I never drank alcohol, but I started turning to fast food as sort of my comfort. By the time I was a teenager, I got really overweight. I developed high blood pressure, pre-diabetes. I fell into chronic depression, had panic attacks day in and day out. And I just was in this abyss, this darkness that I honestly never thought that I would be able to get out of. I never knew that I would be able to escape that darkness in life. By the time I was 18 years old, I met a woman who I eventually married, and I was miserable, and I attracted another miserable person. I went through a divorce, and it was at that point when I was about 23, 24 years old, I was at my lowest of the low. I'm talking not even wanting to live. I didn't care if I lived or died. I had no idea which direction in life I was going to go. So it wasn't until, and throughout that period, I had seen probably 6 or 7 different counselors, psychologists, therapists, and so forth. And I had been labeled as being depressive and generalized anxiety and all these issues that I was always told that, hey, this is something you'll have to just cope with and manage throughout the rest of your life. And it was something that was, yeah, I was never taught the ability to be able to transcend that, to overcome that. I thought that I was just stuck in the state. So when I was 24 years old, I came across the practice of hypnotherapy, and I started learning hypnotherapy, the power of the subconscious mind, how all of our identity, all of our and all of our values that we've been creating throughout our life is all stored into the depth of our subconscious mind. And it was right then when it clicked to me. None of those counselors or therapists or psychologists that I had seen over those years had ever even explained to me what the subconscious mind was. I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea what the subconscious mind was when I was talking to the hypnotist about that. I said, "What is it?" And that's when he started explaining to me that that's essentially the iceberg. The majority of that iceberg is the subconscious mind under the surface that we don't see. He says the reason you are the way you are is because all these issues are stored so embedded into your subconscious mind that it's become your identity. Well, he taught me that hypnotherapy is a tool to help us undo that. And most of us simply don't have the tools to access those layers of the subconscious mind. And everything that he said to me was like unveiling a layer of understanding. And I'm like, man, I had this aha moment in my head to where, wait a minute here, I can move free from this, is what you're telling me? So within a matter of a month, I was able to let go of panic attacks. I was able to actually achieve emotional freedom. It was like I was walking into a whole new person in life. It was almost unbelievable. I was at a point to where I was living a life that I never thought that would have been possible. It was that drastic for change. So I started committing myself to eating better. I let go of all the fast food. I cut it off cold turkey. No issues doing that whatsoever. I started adopting healthy lifestyles. I started exercising more. Eventually, I dropped from about 250 pounds. I got down to about 160 in a year. So close to, almost 100 pounds. And I wasn't working out though. I just cut out the food that I was eating and I started walking a little bit more. By the time I was 26 or 27, I thought to myself, I want to get strong. I want to actually train and get fit. So I started learning nutrition. I started learning supplements like nutritional supplements, herbal supplements, started going to the gym and actually understanding the fundamentals of physical training. I'm like, okay, now my body's starting to feel really good. I felt I had my head on right. I felt I had my body on right. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good. Well, now I'm at a point to where I'm going through divorce number two, divorce number two. And I had 2 boys with her. And my 2 boys now, they're 10 and 9, almost 9. And I was at this point where I'm like, man, I felt like I was getting everything on track. And now here I am going through a divorce. She filed a divorce on me. And I felt like, okay, what's going on here? What's going on in my life? Here comes the third point. Here's where the spiritual component comes into my transformation. I was picking up my stepdaughter at the time, who was the daughter of my then wife, it was like a ballet recital. I was picking her up at a community center. And there was probably about 20 parents picking up their kids in different classes. Now, this community center is a long hallway. There's probably 15 different doors with different activities like ballet, recital, martial arts, and so forth. So all these parents are there picking up their kids at the same time. We're at the end of the hallway. And the reason I'm saying this is because at the opposite end of the hallway, there was a Buddhist monastery down there. And when we're waiting out there, there's this Shaolin monk who was actually here from Tibet giving a seminar. He walked out, didn't look at anybody. He walked straight ahead. He kept his vision straight ahead. He stopped in front of me. He turned and looked at me and he handed me a pamphlet. He didn't say anything, but then he kept walking. And I looked, I'm like, what? He passed probably 20 other people. I have no idea what this meant to be, but I felt some sort of connection there. I'm like, this is interesting. I hadn't been too familiar with Shaolin Buddhism at that particular time. I held the pamphlet and I don't know what I did with it, but anyway, I went home. I have currently put it down someplace, but it just became a backburner thought in the back of my mind. I didn't even think about it anymore. That weekend comes around and I'm up in the bathroom. I remember I'm washing my face and I'm brushing my teeth and I go to reach in for something in there. I can't remember if I was reaching for my razor or something. There was a pamphlet that was sitting in there and I looked at it and there was a Shaolin teaching that weekend. I'm like, okay, why did I pick that up the day beforehand? I'm like, I went to this teaching. I went to this seminar. And it was that same instructor, that same Shaolin monk who was giving a seminar there. And I went in there, it was a free seminar. And I went in there and I'm sitting there listening to everything that he was saying about the teachings of Buddhism, the nature of human suffering, and all these things that he was saying was about an hour long. And I'm like, wow, I feel like I've just found like the third part of my transformation here. And at that point on, I can't remember if I told you this on our phone call, but I started having recurring dreams of this man who kept showing up. And at the time, I was not too familiar with the Nordic sagas and the teachings of, of Odin and the deities that were honored by the ancestors. I wasn't too familiar. I knew of them. I knew the names Odin, Thor, Tyr. I wasn't too familiar with them beyond what you would hear just through pop culture. And in this dream, this figure would come, he would appear, and there was always a tree. Every single dream, there was always a tree. It was a different tree, but there was always a tree. And this figure would appear almost as this enigmatic figure, like he was a shadowy figure. And he would provide some sort of almost profound guidance, like I need to walk toward this person. And every time I go to walk toward him, I would never get any closer. It's like I was walking, but gravity kept pulling me back and I wasn't getting any closer, but I was walking the path. I was trying to walk the path. And then he would fade off into the distance. Like, what is going on? I had that dream maybe 2 times a week. I started doing some research at the time, and I remember I came across something on Reddit. Maybe it was Reddit or Quora. It was one of those two sites. I started talking about the visions that I was having, and I came across a thread of somebody talking about this. I'm like, wait a minute here. That's Odin appearing to me. And it became as clear as day what was happening. And I felt that I was being guided toward those teachings. I eventually started researching and reading the Poetic Edda and reading all the sagas of the Norse traditions. And it all started to make so much sense in here. Then I started reading about Odin's sacrifice on Yggdrasil. I'm like, wait a minute here. This sounds strikingly similar to the Buddha's enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. This is teaching us something. The Buddha's enlightenment, the Buddha didn't enlighten himself to save everybody else. He enlightened himself to develop a sense of self-realization and self-awareness, and then he provided those teachings to others to follow. The same thing is the same story that I gather from Odin's sacrifice on Yggdrasil. He didn't do it to save humanity. He did it to develop a cosmic understanding of the universe, and then others can seek their own liberation in such a way. And to me, I had this another aha moment. I'm like, wow, okay, all these ancient ways had this right. And from then, it guided me down the path that I've been on. And it's been 10 years down that journey, and I've never been able to look back because from my ability to see things from the experiences that I've had, the personal experiences that I've had, these realizations are life-changing, and they're nothing that could ever be conveyed through words. They're experiences, and they're as real as I know the sun will rise tomorrow. Like, that's how I felt in those particular moments. And to me, that's what inspired me to create Dranger Discipline, because I see a lot of people now who I recognize my younger self in them, lost, and not knowing their purpose in life, not knowing their direction in life, spiritually void. And that's a whole other thing too that we could go in sometime too, is the spirituality component of that. And I have a pretty strong background growing up. My grandfather was a Baptist minister for a long time, so I had some exposure to the church. So I had to shift the whole perspective in terms of how I understood the nature of the cycle of life and death, the cosmos, and what we're all about. And it's been a 10-year journey of self-discovery. And honestly, I could never look back, and I'm still learning more every day of my life.
That is one hell of an origin story. I can say that.
That's the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah. Well, the whole Norse thing and the spirituality and stuff is actually what brought me and Aaron together. We just started talking to each other on Instagram, and then we found out things like I was actually supposed to share a birthday with him, but I was born a month early.
Yeah.
Like, weird fun. We're the same age. I'm just happening, she had me a month early. We share a tear tattoo. Like, we got like
Yeah, my first tattoo is the T-Waz. You probably can't see it, but I just got this about 2 years ago. That has some deep significance to me as well. But yeah, that was crazy when we found that out.
It was. Our entire conversation was made up of what? And then you're what?
Yep.
And that's where it took off from there. But it's like, if it wasn't for this path, like, we wouldn't have met. Like, it wouldn't bring all this amazingness into the world. And what you do for people is amazing. And I really like how you blend the mind, body, and spirit, and don't just isolate each individual one.
Absolutely.
It's to be that mix of all of them. And that warrior spirit is something that isn't embodied too much with some spiritualism, because some people think it's just calm and
Right.
peaceful. Yet, you could be vigorously exercising and having that warrior thing. Like Radha's here does a lot of hunting and stuff, and that and that peaceful moment of just being connected to everything, and you can do that with many different aspects in life. So, that's one hell of an origin story.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Chiming in on that.
We spoke a lot. So like once you started talking about Odin and stuff, I'm like, I know what this is.
Yes, absolutely. Such a powerful revelation too at the time when you realize it, you find out, wait a minute, that's what that dream was. Okay.
Yeah.
It stopped. It stopped once I found that out.
Yeah. Because it didn't need to like be on top of you all the time.
Yes. Right.
All right. I'll shut up now. Other people ask questions.
No, please. That's amazing. I intentionally didn't go through your catalog of media and all that. I kind of just clicked random videos, and it's interesting because what you were describing was a lot of like synchronicities, I feel like, that happened in your life, right? And it was interesting because I get this image of you and I was like, okay, so this guy is very concerned with fitness, and now I can tell he's got a fitness channel and everything like that. But I clicked on like 3 videos. I was watching it with my wife. I was like, yeah, this is the guy we're going to be interviewing today. And one of them, you start talking about you do talk about the connectedness with Buddhism and all of that, but then you also started talking about quantum physics and the space that is occupied there. And I was like, okay, now I'm really interested to hear what this guy has to say. And I really appreciate that you got the OG sun god, the OG Germanic god tattooed on you, right? I mean, I think you just told a story that a lot of people in our community can definitely relate to, this being a journey of like rebuilding. And, it's interesting that Norse mythology can be a healing experience for people because it's in media, it's always portrayed as this aggressive society that, they're just a war-minded people. And really, it seems like you're tapping in and noticing the similarities with other cultures and how they're all sort of connected and share similar perspectives. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what drew me to it, really. And is like, wait a minute here. We have all these ancient cultures that we can be portrayed as warrior cultures. And you can look at different parts of the world, different regions of the world who had very similar practices around the same time. That was just the way of life back then. You can go to Japan where, the code of Bushido, the samurai, and who still practice their indigenous ways that still do to this day. Or you could even go to Mesoamerica with the Aztecs and the Mayans. You're going to talk about the savage cultures. You can look over there. So all these cultures sort of had this, this warrior ethos, this warrior mentality. But if we look a little deeper than that, we can tell that they were also still very grounded with who they were. They were very in touch with nature, with spirituality. And I feel a lot of that really gets overlooked, especially in a lot of the European spiritual practices.
Yeah. To think that aggression doesn't exist in nature or nature spirituality is a fallacy, right? It's just about how you use it, right? It's like any weapon.
So one of the things that you were kind of bringing up kind of hit home with me, and it had to do with the body, mind, spirit stuff for what was going on with it, and talking about how there's like the conscious mind, subconscious, and then, unconscious even for what's going on that particular front. And one of the things I would like to kind of illustrate for the audience here is like to kind of help visualize it a bit better and whatnot for how this works is if you take like a target or whatever, or maybe a dartboard, and they have the concentric circles that go into each other and whatnot. The outer layers are the things that are the most easiest to penetrate. And they're the things that matter the least to us in terms of what's going on and the things that we can change the most easily. Whereas the further in you go till you get to that bullseye, that's the core of who we are. That's what it is. That's the hardest part to change. That's what it is. And most people in our modern world, at least, identify their body as themselves there in terms of their identity. And it's all about who they think they are for this particular thing with it. And since you brought in Buddhism, this could be viewed as mindful attachments that we have in terms of how we perceive ourselves on that particular front. I resonate also with the broken household background, if you will, to a certain extent. Mine's a little different. I didn't have the anxiety or the panic attacks or any of the other things of that nature, although that happened on another front for my brother, for his background and what happened there with it. I became more of this sharp dagger-like thing that was very much a weapon that occurred on that particular aspect of it. And I liken it in terms of a metaphor for what can happen in these states to people. Imagine a glass bottle and it represents the relationship that's going on here, and then suddenly it's broken. And so you have little tiny shards of particles that are basically there, and that can represent the broken person on one end for it, where they're completely crushed, almost to dust-like, and that they makes it so way they can't function properly. And then on the other side, you have these jagged, sharp dagger-like things that can literally be used as a weapon and cut you very deep and that kind of thing with it. And so what happens is that most people fall into one of these two categories, still broken for what goes on with it. It's just that one is one side and one's the other side with the way that their mental afflictions that come about for it. And so that's kind of the various different things that go on onto that front that need to be worked out in what Jung would call the shadow self, which that came about sounds like it was done in steps, but mainly through the therapy that you went through first, and then not realizing that was a dead end, then going into doing the hypnosis thing for what's going on, which unfortunately won't work for everybody, mainly because certain people can't get to a relaxed enough state to allow the hypnosis to go into it and whatnot. I'm one of those people, hence the dagger-like aspect. It's like I have to be in control and I have to be doing things on that particular front. Doesn't mean I haven't done my own healing. It just that didn't work for me for what it was. I had to plumb the depths differently. And then, you also, of course, went the final one with it, not just the physical and the mental, but also the spiritual. For what was going on there. And I'm glad you brought up the Bodhi tree as well in terms of enlightenment and whatnot. The notion of a world tree or enlightening tree and whatnot can be found in almost every tradition that there is on the planet in some form or another. So yeah, my question for you is the following, which is, what is your favorite Nordic story, I guess, Norse poem or story, that has inspired you the most in terms of your spiritual journey?
I'm going to say my favorite one was the one that inspired the Tiwaz on my forearm. Tyr sacrifice. And to me, Tyr embodying the entire concept of bravery, of courage, upholding justice, to me was a major turning point in my life. And it was a major milestone for me because for the longest time when I was younger, in my youth, from childhood all the way through my teenage years to my early 20s, I felt that I was so fear reactive. I would make decisions out of fear of consequences, or fear of jumping from the freezer to the frying pan. And I was bound by those. And I was living in this heightened state of panic for so long. And when I came across hypnotherapy, and that helped me balance and center myself, that helped me gain much greater perspective on that. Then when I came across the sagas of Tyr, I thought to myself, wow, the story of the sacrifice, losing his hand, sacrificing a physical part of the anatomy, which we can look at that either literally or symbolically, either or. To me, that's what really stood out. And in fact, it hit home so much to where I took an oath in that particular time to never make a decision out of fear. I had to really ground myself. I had to meditate on this. Every decision that I'd made in the future, it impacted that. I had to ask myself, okay, if I'm faced with a dire situation in life, or even a seemingly minor situation, am I making this decision out of fear or out of true alignment with what's right for this greater good? And to me, I made a vow to him and to myself that I would uphold that oath. And later on, got the tattoo on my forearm. I had a custom-made Tiwaz pendants that I wear every day. So to me, above all, there's many stories that resonate with me. Of course, Odin's The Sacrifice on Yggdrasil is very paramount. But to me, Tyr's story is carried with me throughout the years.
Do you mind if I get a better look at the tattoo that you have?
Yeah, the lighting might not be the best in here.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's an impressive one.
As the Tiwaz, and it's embedded into a shield with a sword behind the shield. This was actually done by a really good friend of mine in North Carolina. She's also in that community. Well, she did. There's nobody else who I trusted to do this type of tattoo than her, because this is her niche. This is what she does. This is her specialty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who is your friend in North Carolina? Because I live in North Carolina and I am so particular about who does my tattoos. Who's your friend? Where are they? Where are they? You don't have the name drop here, but where are they located?
Yes, I mean, she'd be on. She's in right outside of Charlotte. Her name's Danny Blaylock, and you could find her Instagram.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll need to get that. I saw your eyes light up right away. Exactly the type of thing you wanted. That's incredible. Yeah. I think it's, what you're saying about Tyr, it's definitely very true. That's one of the biggest aspects of Tyr. But also with Tyr in that story, with the Fenris wolf and placing his hand there because, he cared for this creature. He wanted to give it some sort of like comfort and everything like that. There's this idea of knowing the fate, right? And then still being a part of it, still taking place in it, right? Knowing the demise, knowing the outcome, and still committing to it, right? I mean, that's one aspect that I find in the modern pantheonic view. I find that's an incredible, one of the most compelling parts of Tyr, knowing his demise.
It was ultimately inevitable what was going to happen, despite any attempts to keep him bind. It was inevitable, and despite that, of being the one who would embody that courage, made the decision to do that. And to me, that's a virtue, and that's a virtue that I believe we can all benefit to strive toward. And it's not easy. It's not easy to do. It takes a lot of grounding to do that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that aspect. That's part of one of the parts of Tyr that I absolutely love is that knowing, it's that courage of doing it anyway, knowing that outcome, because I think then that builds our luck in life. That builds our courage. That builds our value in ourselves. It's that fighting spirit, that thing that keeps us alive.
Absolutely.
I feel like it just feeds into that. It's so cool.
So I know you said this before, and I'm not trying to take up all the time talking or anything like that, but you mentioned it beforehand, before we started recording, but your work, what you've been developing. Do you want to maybe share a little bit of that with the audience?
Yeah, so I was inspired to create Dranger Discipline. Dranger Discipline. So Drengr, some of you might know that word. In its original form, it was a fierce, valiant warrior of the Viking variety who would be just known to march into battle with unwavering determination. But in its original form, what it meant was a rock that withstands the current of the ocean pushing up against it. So a Drengr is a rock that stands strong, steadfast, that it takes up the waves crashing up against it. It doesn't budge. So to me, that was a very fitting term. My wife actually helped me come up with that one, so I got to give her credit for that as well. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have had that name. So I had to give her credit there. So I created that business because I've been doing what I've been doing for many years, but I've never really formally done it in a sense. I've done it sort of part-time, even volunteering, and doing it out of the passion of what I love to do, just making content, speaking on my philosophy in life, building training programs for people. It's always been just something that I've done for fun. And I finally said to myself, I want to actually get established with something. I want to create something impactful, something that I can reach tons of people, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people, potentially more. What can I do to do this? And I created this Dranger Discipline, and it's the 3 extensions. So my philosophy is we are the soul. And of the soul, there's 3 extensions. We have the mind, we have the body, we have the spirit. These are like 3 arms, but they're not to be treated separately. They're all an extension of who we are. So to me, they need to all be aligned, and we need to strengthen each of them individually. And by strengthening them individually, we strengthen them as a whole on a holistic level. So I create workout content for people who are interested in training. I build what I call Primal Instinct Training. So a lot of the physical training that I model is based upon how I perceived a lot of our ancestors to train. So our ancestors didn't neatly balance barbells. They hauled heavy loads for miles and miles. We're talking awkward shaped loads, stones, logs, building ships, and any apparatus you need for that. So it's unconventional training. So I put together something called Primal Instinct Training. Not only does it develop physical functionality in everyday life, but to me, it helps us tap into that innate primal nature that we all have in us. And I feel in this day and age, having to adapt to modern society, we've really lost touch with that innate primal nature. And we see this world that we live in. It's filled with, I mean, just look at it. It's filled with atrocities. It's filled with crime. It's filled with violence. And I feel a lot of that can be attributed to moving away from that primal nature and society sort of shunning it, say, oh, it's bad to be primal. It's bad. It's just primitive. We need to be evolved people. You can domesticate yourself, but we always are going to have that innate nature within us. That's the way I look at things. So to me, that primal instinct training is a way to not only strengthen the physical vessel that we are using in this lifetime, but it taps into that innate nature. So I developed a program similar to that. I speak on the concept of hypnotherapy, the subconscious mind, the quantum realm of infinite possibilities, and to basically transcend all that's happened to us. And I'm a big follower of the Stoic philosophy as well. I would summarize that. There's things that we have control over. There's things that we don't have control over. The majority of things are a result of how we react to things that happen to us. So it's strengthening our ability to stay grounded so we can let go and embrace all that has happened to us while strengthening what we can do to overcome that. And then, of course, we have spirituality. Now, I understand not everybody is going to be a follower of the old ways, and that's okay. I always say, one of the frequently asked questions that I put on my page is, do I have to be a follower of the old ways to follow this program? I say, no. You don't need to be a spiritual person. You don't need to set up ritual. You don't need to conduct ceremony. You don't need to give reverence to any deities. You don't have to do that. You can, absolutely. But it's also living a life of virtue. It's living a life of honor. If we look at some of those old societies, old Viking societies, or old, you name it, we can see the virtuous qualities that they did have. And it's striving to live in alignment with those qualities. If spiritual practice is not something that resonates with you, it does to me. It is a big part of my life. So I put together sort of this holistic program to help people align themselves with their greater good and their greater potential, to help propel themselves on the way forward in life, to make themselves, free of depression, free of anxiety, free of stress, finding your purpose, and creating a holistic program for overall health. And it's, to me, incredibly gratifying when I work with people and they come back, weeks later, months later, and they said, hey, I've been able to let go of this habit. I'm finding my purpose. I'm finding my reasoning. I'm finding my community, my network of people. And overall, I feel like I'm embracing who I am. And to me, the best leaders or teachers or mentors, guide, whatever you want to call them, they're not people who tell you what to do. They're people who embrace your true, authentic self, and they allow you the opportunity to let go of that facade that you've put on, that you feel the need to mask yourself into society and embrace who you really are. And to me, that's what I strive to help people do. And man, I got to say, I just love doing it. And I'm continuing to roll things out. Like I said, I'm working on some books, working on some master classes. Eventually, I want to do some public speaking avenues. But that's sort of the gist of Dranger Discipline. It's embodying the holistic approach to mind, body, and spirit.
I'm going to pull up your website really quick. It's Dranger Strong.
Yes, that's the one right there.
So this is for everyone who's interested in trying to find the resources. It's drangerstrong.com. And it looks like you've got all your material here, your story, your training, and a way to contact you as well, some hypnosis information as well. So yeah, so everyone that's interested, you're going to be looking for this right here.
How is it that most people find you through that? Is it through your Instagram? Is it mostly people who are into the Norse stuff, or do you have like local clients that you meet at your gym? What's like kind of the broad spectrum of how you attract people there?
I would say it's mostly virtual. I would say, if anything, it's all virtual. I don't really do a lot of personal training anymore. I've kind of stepped away from that because I want to focus more on facilitating change as a whole, work on more of like public speaking ventures, and speak on physical training, but not necessarily instruct people through it, if that makes sense. So a lot of people who come to there are essentially on Instagram. Instagram is probably my biggest vehicle that I use to drive this, to push this. I create a content schedule for myself. So every day of the week, I have specific material that I put out there to let people know what it is that I do. So that way there's really no uncertainty about that. People come to my page and you can watch the first, 6 to 9 posts that I have. I want that to be a good indicator of who it is that I am. I would never want there to be any sort of ambiguity or, vagueness to what I do. I want what I do to be out there. So all my posts are very specific to be a genuine reflection of what I stand for.
Yeah, I wanted to go back. You touched on it at the start. And I had something I was really curious about, and then we can move on to other topics too. But hypnotism. So that worked very, very, very well for you, and I've known a lot of other people who it's worked very well for, and not just for kind of like healing past traumas and stuff like that, but for spiritual stuff. I know there's people who have said they've seen past lives, they've seen other things like that in hypnosis, or they have this. It's like a rapid like light movement therapy that they do like that. Is it kind of? I've never done it because anytime I call these places, it's like, okay, it's what kind of traumas are you trying to heal? What kind of things are you trying to get over? I'm like, none. I got over that bullshit. I don't want to bring it up again. So is it something that you kind of have to go through anyway, or can people come into that and have some pure spiritual goals when they do that thing? And you offer some of that yourself, right? So I'd like to get everything you know about it.
Yeah, I am trained in hypnosis, and I didn't become trained in hypnosis when I use it for myself to overcome. I mean, I never would have thought that I would have been able to let go of panic attacks and phobias in the ways that I did. We're talking overnight. I mean, something that I lived with for nearly a decade, and just letting go like that, it was like walking into a whole new person. So as soon as I had that realization, I'm like, wait a minute here. If I'm able to do that, where's the line at? And then I entered the world of hypnosis with the people who do this, who work with people, and seeing these stories. It was almost something like it seemed almost surreal until I experienced it myself. So there are a lot of people who do come into it more for spiritual revelations or realizations because they want to revisit more out of curiosity than anything else, but they want to revisit maybe past lives or how did a situation in our past life impact who we are today. Things like that of that nature. It can help them come to a better understanding of why they are the way they are, that we can work toward it. So yeah, I wouldn't say everybody has a specific issue they want to let go. I would say probably 90% of the people who do inquire about hypnosis do it to let go of a habit or let go of a burden that's holding them back, whether that's a limiting belief, whether that's smoking. Smoking's a big one. Drugs, I mean, it's a big one as well. So most of the people that I've worked with have been letting go of habits, but then it's also facilitating the new life as well. But we have spiritual seekers who want to seek for spirituality, get into that theta state of brainwaves and so forth. And actually talking about hypnosis, the day before yesterday, I actually did, if you guys are interested, I did a live stream on my Instagram and I spoke to a guy named Keith Berry. And I will go out as far as saying Keith Berry is the best hypnotist in the world. He's a hypnotist and a mentalist in Ireland. He's very well known over there. He's at TV shows. And him and I talked for a half hour on Instagram all about hypnosis. And he actually addressed some of the questions that were brought up here about, well, what about the people who say that I've tried hypnosis, but it didn't work? He actually answers that question for you. So if any of you are interested in checking that interview out, it's posted maybe like 2 or 3 posts on my page. And he is phenomenal at what he does. I mean, the guy's almost superhuman level with his ability to get inside the subconscious mind.
For me, I know why it didn't work. For me, I didn't trust the person that was doing it with me enough.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it came down to. So
Yeah. And that's exactly what he said. He's like, when people say that, I say, well, it usually means that you had a trust issue with the hypnotist that you were working with at that particular time.
yeah, no, I mean, trust me, I know exactly why.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier we were that talking about like going against our own nature and then also purpose and that kind of thing with it. And to me, it's because that we try to go against our own nature that we harm the natural world around us so much by trying to like ignore certain aspects of ourselves, and that it also makes us that way, makes it impossible for us to move forward until we start actually like dealing with that side, with that to find our purpose. It's only when we have enough alignment within ourselves and begin that healing process, the want to and desire to even do that and to seek it out, that I found is when people, that's when they start having these huge transformations and whatnot. They have to have that spark of wanting that there has to be more to life and finding some sort of purpose, some sort of meaning behind it and whatnot. Would you say that was true in your case or for other clients of yours that you've dealt with and whatnot?
Absolutely, 100%. Because for the longest time, I didn't have that spark of hope that even could create the visual of the life that I wanted to live. And just to give you an example on that, I felt so lost in all these therapists and counselors and psychologists that I had seen. It was a lot of talk therapy. It was talk you through this. Well, let's talk about what you do when you start having a panic attack. Let's talk about when you feel stressed out. That's okay. Did it feel good at the time to have somebody listening to me? Yeah. But it was more like a psychological release valve. And then after I go home and I'm like, well, all this stuff's happening again, man. Life sucks and all this stuff. And so I never really could create the life that I wanted to create. So the question that was asked of me when I met the hypnotist back in, I want to say 2008, when I asked him if he can help me, he's like, well, what is it that you want? And I didn't even know how to answer the question. Well, I said, I just want to be happy. And he said, he's smiling at me the whole time. And he's like, well, what does that mean? I said, I'm sitting there.
Exactly.
I didn't know what it meant. He stopped me. He's like, let me stop you right there. He's like, I just want to ask you a question. How can you ever live a life that you say you want to live if you can't even spell it out? I said, I guess you're right. And to me, that made me realize, wow, okay. But then he's like, so what kind of life do you want? I start talking, but then what would happen is I would say, but I can't do that because of this. That's what I would say. I can't do that because of this. And he let me go on for a little while, and he's over here like taking notes. He's like, well, what these are limiting beliefs. So can you imagine if those beliefs weren't here? I said, no, I can't. So he said, okay, now I want you to play the role of a character who doesn't have these issues. How would they overcome that? Okay, I can do that. And I started getting creative. So he asked me the right questions to be able to look inward at myself to create that spark that you're talking about. So he helps a good hypnotist, a good person in general who's good at facilitating change, can ask those questions to create that spark. And once you create that spark, then you run with it. Then you pour gasoline on it and you build from there. So 100%, I would agree that you have to, if they don't have the spark, you have to be able to ask the right questions to get them to be able to have that moment themselves. And then you carry off with that, you nurture it, you let it grow. And some days it might be a little dimmer, but you got to kind of keep nurturing it over time. Some people, it might take weeks to work with, but that's okay. Everybody's different. Everybody's on their own journey, and there's no comparison. Well, you let go of your phobias in a day, man. Why am I struggling? Because you're you. It's okay. So I think just reminding people that however they progress is okay.
Absolutely. I mean, that's too many people have. I think there's also part of the modern world. Everything is almost instantaneous now, especially with the internet. That they expect that as well. That's a built-in expectation, even though that's not how reality works sometimes and whatnot. Yeah, certain parts could be instantaneous, but then other parts just aren't, and you gotta acknowledge that that's the case for it and whatnot too.
Absolutely. It's part of the issue with society these days is that everything's instant. The phone's instant, the media's instant, the dopamine's instant, and they say talent will get you in the door, but consistency takes you across the finish line or something along those lines, right?
Like that, the feeling of motivation gets you in the door, and then your consistency is what keeps you moving forward. When you have those days to where you might feel run down, a lot of people, when they feel run down, they turn back out the door because it gets too hard. So that's where consistency really plays in.
So for me, go ahead, Bradas, go ahead.
No, I was just lightly going to say that I really appreciate that a big part of your physical fitness routine incorporates the spirit, the body, and the mind. It incorporates all these things. It's quite refreshing compared to what you get when people, especially young people, go out into the world and look for, because everybody wants to look like the Instagram guy and all this kind of stuff. But you're bringing in content that is like, hey, I'm challenging you to look deeper than just your body, and I think that is amazing. I really hope that more people copy you. I hope people see your success and try to imitate that, because if anything, we need more of that in the world.
I really do. I share my training videos to sort of serve as that inspiration and sort of show a celebration of what we're capable of doing. I don't really do it to give people tutorials or walkthroughs or anything like that, but I'll do these photos of me now, and then I'll post when I was 24, and I'll just show the comparison like, hey, you can go from this to this, but let's look beyond the physical transformation here. We're looking at something a lot deeper, because if I wouldn't have changed what happened up here in my head, what you see here wouldn't be here. And if anything, it wouldn't be sustainable. I would be running away from something versus chasing something. And I see a lot of people like that, who are younger people who go into the fitness industry because they have this desire to not be weak, or they want to be just big and shit active. You're chasing this goal, and if that's what makes you happy, you go ahead and do it. But is it really making you happy? There's so much to me. There's so much more to training. It's a celebration of our life. To me, I owe it to myself. I owe it to my ancestors who probably trekked tens of miles a day just to survive. And here I could be sitting here on a chair all day. Come on. That's kind of how I look at life.
I appreciate what I really like the most about like your content and stuff like that is exactly that point. You show your vulnerability. You show what you once were. There's no shame behind it. You're not like trying to be like this big show off. It's like, no, I was falling apart. I was a damn hot mess. But if you really look deeper, you can fix all three aspects. You gotta, that is one thing that's rare to find, is that genuine person in there that is not afraid to show the weakness, because there's no problems in being weak. It's how you get through it and how you become stronger from it is what matters. If you choose to stay in the weakness, because that's a choice, you choose to stay that way, that's where you got some problems. So it's
Which
good there's
brings us
people out
back
there
to Tyr.
inspiring you. Yes, back to Tyr.
Well, what about Athena or Drift? Do you guys have any insight or questions? Absolutely. I'm not gonna lie. You've been like, I have a list of questions that have pretty much been answered one by one as we're going. I'm like, I don't know, I shared this with you earlier or something along the lines, but you've been crossing them off left and right. One of the big time questions that I'd like to ask, because I was big into fitness and whatnot when I was a bit younger. I'm getting older now. I'm trying to keep that, I guess, momentum going. What we'll say.
Yeah.
What would you say? What are some things that people could do to kind of reconnect to that spirit? People that maybe where you were when you, I guess, were at your lost ways. We all had a downtime. I peaked out and I was in peak condition. I was doing great. I sustained an injury that kind of threw me off my game for a long time. Now, spiritually, I'm sound. I love where my life is going. I have perfect family, we'll say, and all the happiness that one would typically think in life. But when it comes to the connectedness to spirit, the physicality, and a mental state, what would you say could be something that others can seek that help reconnect those?
So one thing I'll do, I'll give you a little highlight of what my days look like here. So I'm usually up every day about 5:15 in the morning. It's pretty much like clockwork. My bedtime's usually between 9 and 10. I'm usually up between 5 and 5:30. And the first thing I do, here's what I noticed. Let's go back a little bit more, and then I'll kind of go into what I'm going into here. What I notice a lot of people do, and this is the society that we live in. We wake up, just we as a collective, we wake up to an alarm that goes off. We hurry up, we run into the bathroom, we brush our teeth, we wash our face, we get ready for our day, whether we're going to work or taking care of the kids or whatever mundane task we have to do. We're doing that. We don't even have time to process waking up. And now going back to the topic of hypnosis, when we're sleeping, we're in delta, the delta brainwaves. That's deep, deep sleep. If we go from delta to beta, just like that, beta is like we're talking right now. We're all probably most likely in beta. We're aware.
I'm not a beta.
We're, some might be an alpha, but it should be a progression of going to like alpha and then getting into beta. And there's a science behind all this. I won't go into that nerd stuff right now, but so what the first thing I do is before anything else, I'll get up in the morning. I go sit outside for 15 minutes. I meditate. I don't even think about what I have to do in the day. I don't think about it at all. I don't think about, oh man, I got to do nothing. And that takes some practice, though. That takes practice to let go of that. I'm not saying you have to just drop that right away, but go outside, meditate. And that could be closing our eyes, just taking a few deep breaths and focusing on the breath. We can let thoughts come into our head. That's okay. People say, oh, I have a hard time meditating because thoughts come into my head. No, no, no. I would say there's a misconception there. Thoughts can come into your head, but think of the thoughts that come into your head is like clouds, and you are the mountain. You are the mountain. You are rooted into the ground. And now those clouds pass over the summit of the mountain. It doesn't change the mountain. It doesn't change its essence. The mountain doesn't reach out and grab those clouds and pull them into it. It feels the clouds and then it lets them drift away. We can allow a thought to come in without grabbing it. No attachment, no judgment. Okay, let it go. Let it go. Continue to focus on our breaths. Be that the focal point. 15 minutes. We all can make 15 minutes. That's why I always tell people everybody can make 15 minutes, whether it's getting up 15 minutes earlier, going to bed 15 minutes. We could all make 15. There's no excuse. So 15 minutes and it grounds me so much. It really does. It grounds me so much. And I'm able to see things a lot clearer throughout the day. Things that would normally make me mad, I'm like able to let it go naturally. I'm like, okay. I can no longer have to react to that. So to me, grounding myself for those 15 minutes in the day makes a huge difference in the morning. Then everything else that happens in the day, I get better perspective of. So that's one thing I really think is important for people to do. They have a much better sense of clarity in terms of what they want to do. The second thing too is start stacking those small wins. If we want to be more active in terms of our physicality, a lot of people will get really gung-ho about this and be like, oh man, I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week. I'm going to hit it for an hour and a half. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. They go there one day, they wake up the next day, they're so sore, they can't even get out of bed. And then they get discouraged and then they stop. And they got so overwhelmed because they tried to be on the level of somebody doing this for years because they want to be there without understanding that all it takes is a small win. Go to the gym 3 times a week, walk for 20 to 30 minutes 3 times a week. Whatever it is that we want to do, be mindful about it and then hold ourselves accountable. Because I always say the worst thing that we can do is to tell ourselves that we're going to do something and then we give ourselves an out, we don't do it. Because then what happens is we don't believe ourselves anymore. We don't believe that we're actually going to do it. And we say, well, every time I start something, I stop, so I'm not going to believe it anyway. So set something that we know we can do. We can all probably go for a 20 to 30-minute walk a day. We can probably do a few sets of push-ups and body weight squats and whatever it is that's reasonable for us, do that and then build on that. And I say, do that for a month. You just won the month. And I say, at the end of the year, if you won more days than you lost, you're doing good. So I think, the first thing is just take that 15 minutes in the morning, really focus on meditation, breathing, centering ourselves, clearing that negative energy from the day before, setting an intention for what we want to do today. Say, I'm going to go for a 20, 30-minute walk. I'm going to do a round of body weight workouts, some push-ups, some squats, some burpees, run a mile if you're feeling eager, whatever it might be, as long as you do it, as long as you do it. And then you do it, and then you feel good. Yeah, I did it. So obviously, those are my two biggest pieces of advice that I could give for somebody who wants to improve mental clarity and improve physical habits to become more active and more healthy. And then stack on top of that. Once you do that, you can start compounding on top of that.
If I may, there's something else I've found that has been extremely helpful, not just for physical stuff, but for just like any habit that you want to form and whatnot. So I take 5-10 minutes at the end of my day before I go to bed. I review my day. I go over the day and whatnot. And I'm grateful for the stuff that I win at, like, as you were putting out before. And then the stuff where even if I didn't lose, let's say, but like maybe it didn't react the way I expected or didn't want to or whatever, something didn't happen with it, I go through and I re-edit it to what I would have preferred instead. And I do that over and over and over again every time that pops up. And it's training my brain what I want to have happen instead and how to make that happen. It's, it's like the self-affirmation things, but it's the visualization technique as well that's going on there. And the reason why I do it right before I go to bed is because I'm so tired at that point that I can usually bypass a lot of my conscious different thoughts for it and make it so that way it goes deeper into it to where it's like, other stuff comes out basically. And again, for the iceberg part we were talking about before, or the concentric circles and that kind of stuff. So
that's awesome. You're essentially doing a form of self-hypnosis by doing that as well, because your brain is in theta. It's in theta, kind of that barrier between sleep and awake. And we're so susceptible to new information in that. And I think what you're saying, I love what you're saying, because I want to say Marcus Aurelius's meditations. He spoke on something almost exactly like what you're talking about. He was for those who know, he was the Stoic Roman emperor, and he talked about reflecting on your day at the end of the day, asking what could we have improved on, visualizing it in our head so we can replay that scenario, because the brain doesn't differentiate between what's imagined and what's real. So you do pretty much what Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius was teaching.
He's actually my inspiration for it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
I just want to say I want to confirm everything you're saying, actually, because in the last week, I've been doing solar meditation. I've been waking up and meditating. And what you're describing is an animistic form of meditation where you are kind of thinking about the mountains or the clouds and you're relating that to your life. And it makes sense because we are nature, essentially, right? We have come from it. We're not separated from it. We are that sort of thing, right? I've been doing these types of meditations and really what I've come to find is that it does create a space in your life where you realize that like, hey, I can come out of anger and go here. Because like when you think about how we're so busy and we're so active or we're thinking all the time and we're trying to deal with our emotions, everything, when we create space for clarity and just like we create a new state of mind for ourselves, I feel like it's almost like a form of self-hypnosis, perhaps, right? Where you're starting to create patterns that you can rely on. It's the consistency that allows you to return to these places that, take you out of your experience so you can better observe it. Something that Marcus Aurelius, I think, would appreciate. But one thing I wanted to touch on is something I was thinking about because I'm actually about to become a father. That's something you mentioned, your father.
Right.
One thing I've been talking about with my wife is that there's a lot of positive affirmation that is tied to the success of pregnancy and the ease of the pregnancy and everything like that, right? So when you go into a situation, it requires you to be quite affirming to yourself, giving yourself good affirmations like, I'm going to be able to do this. I'm going to be able to accomplish this. And I feel like that is like a type of meditation, the self-meditation that we do on the daily that maybe people aren't aware of. If you have a pattern or a mantra that you repeat to yourself where it's like, I'm probably going to fuck up, or I'm pretty scared of this, or this is going to be a difficult thing for me to overcome, you are self-hypnotizing yourself to experience it in that way. And I think that if people were able to tell themselves something different, right, that they could potentially have better outcomes or different outcomes. Is that something that you experience in your practice?
100%, absolutely. And just like you said, that really is a form of self-hypnosis. A lot of the techniques that I use is what's called cognitive reappraisal. And what it does is it takes you to a certain situation that you might have been in before, that you may have reacted in a way that might not have been the most healthy. And you can acknowledge that, you can appreciate that. What this does is it takes you back into that state, and it puts you in the role of an observer rather than being the actual person, the actual you. You're now observing you, but you're now the architect of you. Now you're taking your character and you're kind of mending his mind, and you're changing the way he responded to that situation. So it in turn creates the image in your head that you've responded in that way. And if you do that enough times through repetition, you train your brain to react in the way you want it to react. Sometimes it's instantaneous. Sometimes it takes a few times, but that's absolutely it. It's tricking your brain into believing the events have already played out in the way that you're portrayed in your head. And it's a powerful tool to be able to use. And if you're able to get into that state yourself, then you've basically got a superpower over your own mind.
Agreed. Cool. Well, we're getting close to the end. Do we have any like closing questions or anything like that?
You guys pretty much asked everything that was on my mind. So I thought it was a great interview. I was very pleasantly pleased.
I would definitely say I have one last thing, I guess, perfect for a closing comment, I guess you could say, is if you had a message that you can give to someone else or even to a former yourself, what would that message be to help you achieve where you're at today?
One of the things that I like to say to people is no matter how deep you are into the abyss of the ocean, you can take the bottom feeders of the ocean. They have no concept of light above the surface. And a lot of us, when we're in that state of being, we have no concept that life could be better. So that's why when people say, oh, it's okay, days will improve, days will get better, that goes in one ear and out the other, because they have no concept of what that means. They have no comprehension until they're able to create that. So we have to remember, look at life as sort of being in the abyss of the ocean. You're down there at the bottom. That pressure of the ocean is crushing you. It would crush you. That's how you feel. That's how your soul feels when you're in the abyss. But that doesn't take away from the fact that that light is above the surface. And if you can find that reason to fight, that one reason to just swim above the current, fight the current, eventually you're going to see that little glisten of light on the surface. You might not recognize what it is. You might not be able to see your surroundings, but that light is going to guide you to it. And you have to continue walking to it and continue, despite any distraction in this world, continue to fight for that. Identify what that light is and let that be your guide. Let that be your lighthouse that pulls you out of the abyss, because it's there despite if we see it or not. So I always say, use the analogy of the ocean, and the fight against the current at the beginning is going to be the hardest part. But as soon as we start our ascent up, that water pressure is going to dissipate, and we're eventually going to be able to get our head above water and see a whole new world that we wouldn't have ever believed that we could see. So that's what I would say would be a key takeaway for anybody who might be going through some hard times like that, is remember that that light is always above there, regardless if we're able to see it down there or not. Sometimes we got to fight against that pressure, but it's there.
Beautiful. Get it through the surf and it should be smooth sailing. Even if a storm goes, well, raise the sail.
Absolutely. Raise the sail. We can always adjust the sails accordingly. The storm will always come, but we can always adjust that sail.
Beautiful. All right, man. That was an incredible experience. Thank you for sharing all of that. Man, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to share this with the world.
Awesome. I really appreciate it. I'm really happy to be on here, and I would love to be back anytime if you guys want to do a continuation.
Very cool. Yeah, if you come up with a new project or anything like that, please reach out to us, and you're always welcome here.
I appreciate that. I really do. And it's been an honor with you guys, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys inside the publish it.
Yeah, we got a list in front of us, but yeah, I guess I'm going to go ahead
January
and cut it off
time,
here.
January, February, expecting.
Nice. Perfect. I'll keep an eye out for sure.
I'm going to cut it off here. Thank you, Aaron. Everyone go check out drangerstrong.com, Dranger Discipline. Give this man your love. He is really quite the surprise. I didn't view his content to be surprised, and certainly I was. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Man, it's an honor. Truly appreciate it. Thank you all for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. Wishing you all a great one.
Thanks.